What is going on, everybody? And I'm very sorry that this video is super late. I've been trying to do this video for the past few days because I wanted to wait for all of the hype and a lot of the information coming out of E3 to be out there before I actually made my overall thoughts video on E3 2017, but my previous attempts at making this video just really did not satisfy me and just things happened, so hopefully this is the last time I actually have to record this video, and because this is really starting to frustrate me that I just couldn't get this video done any sooner. So apologies for that. Let's get into it because this is probably going to be a very long video. So this is going to be my overall thoughts on E3 2017. And overall, even though it was kind of underwhelming, I still thought E3 2017 was pretty good. It was certainly better than a lot of previous E3s that have happened, because I'm seeing people say that this is one of the worst E3s in recent memory, which is not true at all. There have been many worse E3s. There were E3s where Microsoft would spend ungodly amount of minutes on the freaking Kinect, for many years, by the way. And then I remember one year Sony had that horrible PlayStation Move demonstration on that Wonderbolt game, which that was a dumpster fire. That was the definition of a dumpster fire. And then, of course, we had Nintendo. One year they did that Wii Music thing, which was just stupid. And then some of these conferences actually had musical numbers. So, you know what? Forgive me if I think just talking about strictly games is a lot better than previous E3 conferences, because that's what this E3 was. The E3s this year were just nothing but games after games after games after games. There was no sales talk, no gimmicky bullcrap, and no musicals. Sorry about that. Just nothing that was, in my opinion, considered a waste of time. So, alright, now, to prevent people from asking me what I thought was the best E3 conference and the worst E3 conference, I'm going to talk about all the conferences in this video, starting with what I thought was the worst conference, all the way to what I thought was the best E3 conference. So, just make the list in the order that I do them in the video, and there you have it for my rankings on the E3 conferences. So, alright, enough wasting time, let's get into this. We're going to start with the worst E3 conference in my opinion. And it pains me to say this because they're my home team. I'm talking about the Bethesda conference. See, I'm from Maryland. Baltimore, Maryland to be exact. And I'm about probably an hour and 15 minutes from the Bethesda offices. And I haven't actually visited there yet. I still plan to do that one day. But yeah, I consider them my home team. And they've actually made some pretty good games. And they've published some pretty good games. So, it just pains me to see what a disaster their E3 was this year. First off, is it just me, or did they not want to be here this year? That's what it felt like to me, because they didn't really have anyone from Bethesda there. I think they had like one guy, and he came out for like a minute or two, and that was it. The rest of their E3 was just pre-recorded video packages from Bethesda Land, which was pretty cringy. That was pretty cringy. So, yeah, it felt like they didn't want to be there, and it's like, they could have accomplished this without renting a stage at E3. They could have just done a stream on YouTube or Twitch, and it would have accomplished the same thing. So, I don't know what's up with that, because there have been previous years where Bethesda had a really good conference. Like, I think it was a couple years ago, in my opinion, they had the best E3 conference. So, I don't know what the hell happened here, but alright. They showed off Doom and Fallout 4 VR. Now, I don't know how anyone can stand playing those kind of games in VR for too long, but what annoyed me about this was that, what platform is it for? Is it for PlayStation VR? Is it for Oculus Rift? Is it for the HTC Vive? Which one is it for? I don't know. They didn't explain. They just said, oh, Doom and Fallout 4 coming to VR. That was it. If you want people to get excited about this, which, by the way, not a lot of people have VR, so you're already working on a limited audience here. If you want people to be remotely excited about this, you need to be more specific on where these are coming to. You just have to be. Because, let's just say I had a PlayStation VR. Why would I get excited for this if I don't know if it's coming to PlayStation VR or not? You know what I mean? So, yeah. Alright, then of course, they did their yearly Elder Scrolls Online routine, which, Bethesda, just move on. Just move on. Not everyone is playing Elder Scrolls Online. I mean, I would honestly love to try it, but they want way too much hard drive space on my PS4. They want an ungodly amount of space. I think it's over 200 gigabytes once you add up everything. So I would love to try it, but I can't. So, Bethesda, it's just time to move on. It's just time to move on. Please make Elder Scrolls 6. Please make Elder Scrolls 6. Why won't you make Elder Scrolls 6? And that also reminds me, why do you continue to beat Skyrim into the ground and milk it to death? Because that's what they did here. They, of course, announced that Skyrim is coming to Switch, which, I mean, I guess that's good for some people, but I am not interested in paying full price for the 360 and PS3 version of Skyrim, which I played back in 2011. But you can actually add Nintendo stuff into the game. Like, you could dress the character up as Link from Breath of the Wild and put his weapons in the game. Well, here's the problem with that. The PC version already did that years ago, and they did it better. That's not exciting. I mean, how many versions of Skyrim have they released now? Like, what, 3 or 4 now at this point? Bethesda, it's time to move the fuck on. Move on and please make Elder Scrolls 6. I mean, are you even going to? I don't even know. It's like they've shown nothing or talked about it at all. I mean, I would think if they're working on it, they would at least be talking about it. This would have been the perfect opportunity to talk about Elder Scrolls 6. Okay, but it is what it is. Maybe one day we'll get it. Who knows? But okay, they also talked about, and this was a disaster. They talked about this Creation Club, which, in a short summary of the Creation Club, it's basically paid mods. Bethesda, you are out of your fucking minds if you expect people to pay for mods. PC gamers have gotten mods for free since day one. And you released mods on Xbox One for Fallout 4. And I think the Skyrim Special Edition got it too. Once again, for free. Nobody's going to pay for mods. I think the only people that would, and this is a very slim chance that this would happen, is if the PlayStation 4 gamers were that desperate enough to want to try out mods. They might throw a buck or two here or there to try out some mods. But that's it. That is it. This is a disaster, and it's going to blow up in your face. Okay, and then they also talked about the Elder Scrolls card game. Once again, mobile game, don't care. It's not the place to talk about this kind of stuff. Moving on. Then they showed a new Dishonored game, and I was actually intrigued because I like Dishonored. I haven't gotten around to 2 yet, but I still plan to eventually. But I like the Dishonored. I like the series. And when I saw this, I was like, is this a new game? I mean, you just released 2. You just released 2. So you're already making 3? Or maybe this is a DLC for 2? And I also thought that maybe this could have been like a multiplayer Dishonored. Like an arena-style multiplayer with the Dishonored universe and characters. In my opinion, that could actually work, if done right. But no, it seems like it's a new expansion. It's called Death of the Outsider, which I'm definitely interested to hear more about this game in the future. So, alright, then they talked about Evil Within 2, which looked cool. I haven't played the first one yet, so I can't really get excited about it. But for people who like that series, there you go. And then, of course, Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus, which I can't wait for because Wolfenstein The New Order was one of my favorite games of this generation. It's one of the best first-person shooters from this gen that almost nobody played. So I definitely go recommend Wolfenstein The New Order if you haven't played that yet. It is definitely cheap enough to buy. It's really good, trust me. And I'm assuming this is a sequel to The New Order. I mean, I've heard differently from some other places, but this looks like it's a sequel to The New Order, which I'm fine with. It kind of makes the ending of The New Order, like, doesn't make a lot of sense now, but I'm excited for more Wolfenstein, so there you go for that. So that was Bethesda's conference, just pretty crappy, and the worst conference of E3 this year. Alright, now let's get into the EA conference, which was a lot of people's worst conference of this year, but it wasn't mine, but you will see why in a second. So, EA was pretty crappy too. I'm not going to deny that. It was pretty crappy. Aside from A Way Out, which was done by the people who made Brothers, which was a decent game. I'm definitely intrigued by A Way Out and what it could be. More Battlefield 1 content, which I still love Battlefield 1, so I'm definitely more game for content. And of course, my most anticipated game for this year, which is saying a lot because there's a lot of games coming out this year, Star Wars Battlefront 2. EA was garbage. Because aside from that, they showed absolutely nothing that I cared about. So they showed Need for Speed Payback, which I like to call Need for Speed Payback Fast and the Furious Edition, because it's honestly, that's what this is now. It looks like the recent Fast and the Furious movies. And honestly, EA, if you want people to buy these Need for Speed games, if you're actually going to model them from those movies, put The Rock in it. It worked for the Fast and the Furious franchise. Once The Rock got put in it, more people, like myself, got interested in the franchise. So just put The Rock in the game, then people will buy it. Otherwise, I don't see that many people are going to care about this. So, and the rest of their conference was just sports, 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 and sports, and sports, and sports, and more sports. You love your sports? They got your sports. EA needs to understand that not every single person out there cares about sports games. And you should not spend so much time just on one genre. They spent 20 plus minutes just on FIFA. Just on FIFA. Not every single person cares about FIFA. So don't spend that long on something that most people care about. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, Dan, they spent a lot of time on Battlefront. And you're right, they did. But the majority of people care about Battlefront 2. Battlefront 2 reaches a more wide variety of audience. There's more people out there that care about Battlefront 2 than FIFA. So that's the difference. Spend the majority of time on games that most people care about. But of course, EA did not listen to that. And this is the conference we got, which was garbage. But the only reason it does not rank lower than Bethesda for me is because of Battlefront 2 and just Battlefront 2, because they spent 35 plus minutes on Battlefront 2. And that was good enough for me, because I can't wait for Battlefront 2. I just can't wait for Battlefront 2. Okay, now we're going to get into probably the most controversial part of my video here. We're going to talk about the Microsoft conference. Now, you can look at the Microsoft E3 conference two different ways, and you can grade them based on how they did, based on how you view it. If you're grading the conferences based on the amount of games shown, then Microsoft did extremely well because they showed a ton of games. They showed more games than any of the other companies that had conferences. You can't deny that. They did. They showed a lot of games. But if you grade their conference based on how well they sold the new Xbox system to you, and you might want to buy it based on what they showed at this E3, then in my opinion, they failed. They absolutely failed. But let's get into that. First off, the Xbox Scorpio is now called the Xbox One X, which is a very, very stupid name. Why did they call it that? Why? You know, these companies, they really need to start marketing these names. They need to do market research on these names and gauge interest on what people might want these systems to be called. I mean, what harm does it do to send a poll out to people going, what do you think the new Xbox or whatever system should be called? And give like a listing of 4 choices or do more. And then whatever gets the most votes, maybe you should call it that. Because in my opinion, the Xbox Scorpio would have been a fine name to call this thing. Because the Scorpio name is already shown to be a marketable name. Look at how many Xbox fanboys put the Scorpio symbol into their online usernames. A lot of them. Just the imagery of a scorpion and other animals have been used for lots of products over the years. Calling this the Xbox Scorpio would have been perfectly fine, and it would have made sense, but no, of course, they had to call it something stupid. And Microsoft isn't the only one guilty of this. The other companies have called their products stupid names as well, like Nintendo with Wii U. So Microsoft isn't the only one guilty of this, but they could have done a lot better job with the name. And it's going to be $4.99, which, I expected from day one that this thing was first talked about and what people thought it was going to be. And once the specs came out, I said it can't be lower than $4.99. That is the least it can be. And that is what they priced it at. And they even said that this is going to be a loss for them. So, yeah, that wasn't a big surprise to me. And of course, they talked about how it's going to be native 4K, 60 frames per second for everything. And it's the most powerful console out there. And it's also the smallest Xbox system, which is very surprising to me. Of course, no power brick, which, good on you, Microsoft. Once again, you got rid of the power brick with the Xbox One S, so it's good that you got rid of it for this. Good on you. That power brick has been stupid ever since you had it on the 360. But here's the problem. They did not show off what this console is capable of. If you want to sell people on the console, you need to actually show it off. And this conference did not show it off. Nothing was shown in 4K or 60 frames per second. Because people really can't view it in that. Most people can't. So how are you going to show all this stuff off if you can't actually show it off? See, that's the problem that this console is going to have. You talk about 4K and all this other stuff, but yet you can't really show it to people. It's almost like this is going to be a gamble for a lot of people. So, they didn't really do a good job there, in my opinion. They just really didn't. I am not excited for this thing whatsoever, especially since they showed almost no exclusives at this entire conference. Yes, they showed the most games, but almost all of the games they showed were either multi-platform games or timed exclusives, or, as Microsoft likes to put it, this is their fancy word of saying timed exclusive, Xbox One console launch exclusive. That's another way of saying timed exclusive. When your conference is full of games that I can get on other platforms, why should I be excited about Xbox? Now, they kept throwing the word around exclusive and they used it in different phrases, so someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But it doesn't look like they showed anything on stage that was actually legitimately exclusive for the Xbox One. Almost everything was a timed exclusive, or it was also going to be available on PC. Once again, someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Because I would love to know what these games are, because they need exclusives. It has been proven that people buy consoles for exclusives. Look how many people went out to try to get a Nintendo Switch just to play Zelda Breath of the Wild. Even though Zelda Breath of the Wild was also available on the Wii U, people didn't care about that. They didn't go buy Wii U's for that. They wanted to buy the Switch for that game, which is a Nintendo exclusive. Exclusives sell the systems, and Microsoft and their fanboys don't seem to understand that. So, in my opinion, that is why the Microsoft E3 conference this year failed. Because they did not get me interested in buying an Xbox One X. Or even investing in Xbox in general. I'm just not excited. I'm just not. I'm sorry. Now, once again, it wasn't a bad conference by any means because they showed a lot of great games. I mean, they showed Forza, which looks great. They showed Crackdown 3, which looked okay. The Cuphead finally got a release date, thank God. Been waiting for that forever. Or at least it feels like forever. But they showed a lot of great games. It's just... It just did not sell me on Xbox as a brand. Because a lot of these games I can get elsewhere. Alright, you know what? It's now time to talk about the biggest surprise of E3. We're going to talk about the Nintendo conference. Nintendo actually had a solid conference, and I'm shocked that I'm saying this. Nintendo did really good this year. Now, I'm not going to go overboard like a lot of other people in saying, oh, Nintendo had the best E3, Nintendo won E3, Nintendo saved E3. No, they didn't. Their conference wasn't perfect. There were some flaws, but it was still an overall solid conference. So, they showed off Xenoblade 2, which looks pretty good. I didn't play the previous games, so I'm looking forward to at least trying this new one. And of course, my grandmother loves Xenoblade Chronicles, so I'm definitely interested in the game. We'll see how that goes. Super Mario Odyssey looks freaking amazing. This is the first time I've been excited for a Mario game in so long. At least it feels like it's been so long since I've been excited for a Mario game. And this looks like a throwback to Mario 64 and Mario Sunshine, the open world 3D Mario games, which we haven't had in a very long time. So, definitely can't wait for Mario Odyssey. They showed off a new Yoshi and Kirby game, which I'm not really into the Yoshi and Kirby side-scrolling games anymore, but if you are excited for that, more power to you. They talked about Breath of the Wild DLC, which I'm currently playing Breath of the Wild on my Switch that I got a couple weeks ago for my birthday, and I'm enjoying Breath of the Wild so far, but I'm honestly not sure this DLC will be worth it. Based on what I've heard, I definitely need to see more with it. I think they could do more with DLC other than, cosmetic things, but we'll have to wait and see. They announced that an actual Pokemon game, a full-fledged Pokemon RPG, is going to be on the Switch in the future. That's great, but once again, they showed nothing about it, which means they are probably in the very early stages of planning, which means we ain't going to get this game anytime soon. Which leads me into what most people were excited about from this conference, and that Nintendo finally acknowledged that Metroid exists. They finally acknowledged that Metroid is one of their top franchises to a lot of people. So they announced Metroid Prime 4. But here's why I'm not too overly excited about it. Because first off, I'm not the biggest Metroid fan. I don't hate the franchise. It's just didn't catch my attention as much as other Nintendo franchises. But they're still good games. And I can see why people like them. But I just can't get excited over a game that has nothing to show. All they showed was a logo, which, for all we know, could have been made an hour or two before the actual E3 event. They had no trailer. They had no gameplay footage. They didn't even have concept art. They had nothing, which means they probably haven't even started production yet on this game. So, I can't get excited for a game that, as of now, probably doesn't exist. Because if they actually started making this game, they would have something to show. Because that's what E3 is about. It's about showing these upcoming games. They had nothing to show for this game, which means they probably haven't even started making it yet. So I can't get excited for that. I just can't. But it's good that they finally acknowledged that Metroid still exists. So it's good. They announced that Rocket League's coming to Switch, which, that's great. I played Rocket League two weeks ago. It's kind of amazing. It's kind of amazing to see how far this game has come in the past 2 years, but I've already played it. I got my time out of it. But also, since this is a heavily multiplayer-influenced game, it even has its own esport, how are you going to do your voice chat on the Switch? Because the Switch has this weird voice chat thing where you have to hook your phone up and to an adapter, and it's really convoluted and stupid, so I don't see many people doing voice chat for this, which kind of kills the point of a big multiplayer game like Rocket League. So, overall, Nintendo had a solid conference. It wasn't the best conference at E3. It did not save E3, but they still did a good job, which, you know what, for Nintendo, that is all you really need to ask for. Alright, it's now time to talk about the Sony conference, which is probably going to be another polarizing part of this video because not a lot of people seem to enjoy Sony's conference this year, and I think a lot of their reasons are kind of dumb, in my opinion. First off, Did Sony hold back for E3? Did they hold things back? Yes, they did. They most certainly held back for this E3. It seems like they played it safe this year. But here's what a lot of people don't seem to understand. They seem to forget that there's this thing that comes out this December. It's an event called the PlayStation Experience. Yes, Sony is the only one out of all the companies that has their own event where there's no competition. And that's where they can show off all of their other games and all of their other projects. So, yes, they held back things from E3 probably for PlayStation Experience, which makes sense to me. Like, people were complaining that Last of Us 2 wasn't at this year's E3. They first revealed it at last year's PlayStation Experience. And they already said that it's still in the early stages of production. So do you really think they could just rustle up some gameplay or something in just a few months after the last PlayStation Experience for E3? You have to give these things time. So I can almost guarantee you that we're going to see something from The Last of Us 2 at this year's PlayStation Experience, which I can't wait for because The Last of Us is a great franchise. And some people also complained that, there was no Bloodborne 2. Like, come on, do people really think Bloodborne 2 is coming out? Especially since From Software, I think they said somewhere that they were taking a break from the Souls type of games. And they even said they had a new IP coming out. They were working on a new IP. So, once again, early stages. They didn't have enough time to put anything together for E3. People need to understand that. But what did Sony show this year at E3? They showed Uncharted Lost Legacy, which looks amazing. I'm a big Uncharted fan, so I can't wait for that. They showed a Horizon Zero Dawn expansion called The Frozen Wilds, which Horizon Zero Dawn was a really great game. It was a big surprise for me, so I can't wait for that expansion. They showed Days Gone, which looks really cool. Looks really intriguing. In my opinion, Days Gone is what the Walking Dead TV show should be. I'm not the biggest Walking Dead fan, but every time I've tried to watch that show, it's just in my opinion, it's what it should be. What Days Gone is what I'm trying to say. So, can't wait for more Days Gone. They showed a Monster Hunter game, which was kind of surprising because Monster Hunter has always been seen as a Nintendo-only franchise for the longest time. And it's called Monster Hunter World, but it's not exclusive. It's also coming out on Xbox and PC. Sony could have really stole E3 this year if this happened to be an exclusive. But it's not. It's multi-plat. And I'm not really big Monster Hunter fan, so I can't really say this excited me. So, alright, they announced a Shadow of the Colossus remake, which looked really cool. There's a lot of big Shadow of the Colossus fans out there, so this will excite those guys. They showed off some Call of Duty World War II multiplayer, which, despite some recent events surrounding the game, which I may make a video for in the future, I'm still looking forward to this game. I'm glad Call of Duty is going back to World War II. I've been sick and tired of the futuristic Call of Duties for the longest amount of time. So I'm glad to see they're going back to their roots, and I can't wait to play the game. And then, of course, they did a big segment on PlayStation VR, which is good that they're supporting VR, because Sony has been notorious for not supporting some of their products, like the PlayStation Move, and to an extent, the PlayStation Vita. And that's why those things eventually die off, because if you don't support those products, it dies off, and then nobody buys it. So it's good that that Sony is supporting PlayStation VR, but they spent way too much time on VR at their main E3 show. What they should have done here was put a lot of these VR games on the pre-show that they had. I think that would have worked out a lot better. But it's good to see that Sony is supporting PlayStation VR, and I hope to try it out one day. I would love to, because everyone I've talked to in person and online that has actually had a PlayStation VR or tried it, they said it's the real deal. So I'm looking forward to trying it one day, hopefully soon. Alright, and they also showed off the new God of War game, and it looks great. I can't wait to try it. It looks different from the old God of War games. It's still called God of War. I was hoping they would have a title for it, because I still don't know what this is supposed to be. Is this a remake? Is this actually God of War 4? Is it a sequel to 3? Because it's just called God of War. I don't know. I would love to know. I was hoping they would have at least a subtitle for the game. But it is what it is. Then, of course, they showed off the Detroit game, which I'm not the biggest fan of the David Cage games, like Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls. So if that's what you're into, then you'll probably love Detroit. It's not really my thing. Then, of course, they showed off the new Spider-Man game, which looks freaking awesome, even though I think they're kind of heavy on the QTEs, which I'm not the biggest fan of QTEs, but this game still looks fun as hell. I can't wait to play it, and I was hoping that it would release this year, but it's releasing next year, and that's my main problem with the Sony conference. They don't have a big holiday release this year. They should have at least released God of War or Spider-Man for this holiday. More specifically, Spider-Man, because God of War has always been seen as a spring, March release. They should have released Spider-Man for this holiday. Their main games are coming out next year, which, in my opinion, it's going to kill some of their momentum, in my opinion. So I think they should have at least released one of those games for this year. And not only that, since they have the PlayStation experience later in the year, Sony should have really taken this opportunity to show off more newer titles for E3. Since most people watch E3 more than anything else out there, they should have shown off more newer titles, newer exclusive titles. And they should have saved some of this stuff they showed at this E3 for the PlayStation experience. But overall, Sony still had a good conference. They still had a good conference at the end of the day, and good games are coming. And to be honest, that's all that really matters at the end of the day. Alright, we have reached the final E3 conference, and in my opinion, this was the best E3 conference for this year, and that is the Ubisoft conference. Ubisoft did a really good job this year, and I'm kind of surprised that they did. But they did. They showed off a lot of good stuff, so let's get right into it. They showed the Mario Rabbids game, which I wasn't too crazy about. I thought Rabbids and Mario merged together would be really, really weird and did not make a lot of sense. And to be perfectly honest, it's still kind of weird and still doesn't make a lot of sense, but they really did something innovative here. They made a Mario game in the style of a strategy game like the XCOM games. Now, once again, it's not my cup of tea, so this game does not appeal to me. But I'm an objective person. In my opinion, that's what sets me apart from a lot of other people in the gaming community, is that I can give credit where credit is due. Even though this doesn't appeal to me, this game is very creative. And Nintendo, since they usually do the same old year after year, it's good to see that they're finally doing something different with one of their franchises for once. So I gotta give them points for being creative. And the fact that Ubisoft was willing to work with Nintendo on something like this, to do something creative with one of their franchises, and the fact they even had Shigeru Miyamoto on a non-Nintendo thing at E3, that says a lot. And even the developer of this game was crying in the audience, proud of his creation. I mean, you just gotta respect that. So even though this isn't for me, I gotta give credit where credit was due, and this was still a good thing to show. And this also shows that Ubisoft has been one of Nintendo's biggest third-party developer supporters. And a lot of Nintendo fanboys trashed Ubisoft, when, in my opinion, they should be giving Ubisoft a lot more credit for supporting Nintendo, more than a lot of other people out there. Hopefully this leads to them showing Ubisoft a little bit more respect. So, alright, they also showed The Crew 2. And The Crew 2 isn't just about racing, it also has planes and boats and motorcycles, and isn't just cars. Honestly, don't really care. It's not for me. One of the biggest downfalls of the first Crew game was that I think it was always online, which is a huge problem for any game. If it's always online, it leads to so many problems. Hopefully this is at least decent. Then they had Elijah Wood there, which was really interesting, and they showed off a VR game called Transference, I can't really say much about this game. They didn't really show a lot. Can't really get excited about it, but it could be good. I don't know. And we're now going to get to, in my opinion, my favorite thing at the Ubisoft conference. It was a game called Skull and Bones, which is basically, they took the ship mechanics from Assassin's Creed 3 and 4, and they made a whole game around that. It's a pirate ship battles, which I'm a big fan of pirates. I like more pirate games. This looks so much freaking fun. Online battles between like 5 versus 5 and free-for-alls with all the ships. It's just, I'm just thinking of all the different ways this game could go. Maybe it could be more than that. Maybe it could be like you can go on land for stuff too. I think it might just be ships because that's really all they showed. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But this looks so much fun and it blows the hell out of Sea of Thieves on the Microsoft side. I mean, that looks like a joke compared to this game, to be honest. Alright, and then they showed off Far Cry 5, which I can't wait for. I'm glad to see Far Cry going in a different direction other than being in an exotic location. It's actually set in Midwestern America. And this looks really cool. I can't wait to see more of this game. And especially since a lot of the SJWs hate this game, that is now it's definitely now a day one buy for me, just to piss off the SJWs. So, can't wait to see more Far Cry 5. Then, of course, they talked about South Park Fractured But Whole, which I can't wait for because South Park Stick of Truth was such a freaking amazing game. Fractured But Whole is actually coming out this October, or as I like to call it, Broketober, with all these major releases that are coming out just this October alone, which is crazy. I can't wait for this game. If it's anything remotely close to Stick of Truth, this is going to be an insta-hit. And then, of course, they announced a South Park mobile game called South Park Phone Destroyer, which, it could be good, I guess, but once again, I'm not the biggest fan of mobile games being shown at E3. It's not really the place to do them, in my opinion. And then, of course, they actually had Just Dance, but of course, Ubisoft every year has to do a Just Dance segment because that's one of their popular franchises, which, by the way, this new Just Dance is being made for the Wii and Wii U. So yes, we're still getting Wii and Wii U games in 2017 and 2018. So there you go with that. But here's what made this different. They did not spend a lot of time on Just Dance, which, thank you, Ubisoft. You finally got something that EA doesn't get. You don't spend a lot of time on things that don't appeal to the audience that is watching E3. Most people watching E3 don't give a damn about something like Just Dance. So what did Ubisoft do? They showed it for a little bit, for a couple minutes, then they got out. That's what you have to do. EA needs to start doing that with some of these sports games, but they'll never do that. And then, of course, this is what won E3 for Ubisoft, in my opinion. They announced Beyond Good and Evil 2. Yes, it has been 15 years since the first Beyond Good and Evil game. 15 years! They finally announced a sequel. But actually, it's not a sequel. It's actually going to be a prequel. Which is kind of strange because they call it Beyond Good and Evil 2, but it's a prequel. In my opinion, they should have just put a subtitle on it. They shouldn't have called it 2. Whenever you're going to do a prequel for anything, you need to put a subtitle on it. Like, for example, Bioshock Infinite is a prequel to all the other games. So they didn't call it Bioshock 3, they called it Bioshock Infinite. Even though this game is a pile of crap. Gears of War Judgment. They didn't call it Gears of War 4, they called it Gears of War Judgment. God of War Ascension. Once again, wasn't called God of War 4. It was called God of War Ascension. That's what they should have done for this. They should have called it Beyond Good and Evil something. But it is good that we're finally getting another Beyond Good and Evil game. And this is what E3 is about. E3 is about these bombshells. These big announcements. And this is what Ubisoft had that the other conferences lacked. They lacked that one big bombshell announcement. And that is what won Ubisoft E3. So, we've finally reached the end of my video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. If you actually watched it all the way to now, I definitely appreciate you watching the whole thing. So, alright. Those are my thoughts on E3 2017. Please let me know what you thought about E3 this year. And until next time, y'all have a good one.